Masons and the Knights of Malta and the Knight Templars and the puppets of the Vatican who are running their churches. You know how many people who are leading the biggest congregations in America today are truly born-again believers in the Most High. They're very few. Most of them have already sworn their loyalty to Lucifer. And so you're being deceived by them. I mean, look at Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn's a Knights Templar and Knight of Malta. And I've put some information on my site at SherryTalkRadio.com, some more in regards to what the Knights are and about Benny Hinn and a lot of these last days charismatic movement leaders. I mean, they're all just leading you to the pit of hell, folks. Does the Bible teach pacifism? I want to get into that for a few minutes here. You know, many people, Christians included, assume that Christ taught pacifism, and pacifism being a nonviolent, a very peaceful approach to everything. Don't defend yourself, don't do anything approach. And they cite Matthew 5:38-39 for their proof in this. And in this verse, Christ was saying, "Ye have heard not to resist an evil person, but whosoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also." And this is the Sermon on the Mount from which this passage is taken. It deals with righteous personal conduct and not seeking personal revenge against someone who has harmed you. In this passage, Yahushua is clearing up confusion that led people to think that conduct proper for the government, that is taking vengeance, was also proper for an individual to do. You know, even the words used by Christ indicates that he was addressing a confusion or a distortion that was commonplace among the people. Several times in the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, he used the same "you have heard it said" figure of speech to straighten out misunderstandings or falsehoods being brought by the religious leaders of the times. You know, to further underscore the point that Yahushua was correcting the religious leaders on their teaching that an eye for an eye applies to private revenge, consider that in the same sermon he strongly condemned false teaching. Whoever therefore breaks one of the commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. That was in Matthew 5:19. Clearly then Christ was not teaching something different about self-defense than is taught elsewhere in the Bible. Otherwise he would be contradicting himself, and he would not be teaching men to break one of the commandments. You know, private vengeance means, you wouldn't stalk down a criminal or somebody or go after somebody who has wronged you or who's hurt you or has insulted you. You know, and what he was saying was don't seek personal revenge against somebody who harms you. You don't seek revenge. You let the civil magistrates handle it, the local governments handle it, in other words, the police handle it. You don't put personal vengeance in your own hands when someone harms you. And so a lot of people misinterpret that entire teaching there to not defend themselves against attackers, period. You know, they use this as a command to falter against the wicked. You know, they misunderstand the passage of Scripture and disobey Yahweh's commands to protect their life from attackers based on that one misunderstanding of turning the other cheek, which is the whole thing about personal revenge. It had nothing to do with self-defense. It had nothing to do about self-defense. You know, this widespread misinterpretation is a clever deception by Satan, welcomed into the churches to lull believers into pacifism and into error to keep them from defending themselves against the tyranny he then creates to come up against them with. You know, how many believers over the centuries have died because they disobeyed Yahweh's commands to protect and defend themselves against their enemies? Millions have. You know, we talk about self-defense in Exodus 22, 2-3. We read, "If the thief is found breaking in and he is struck so that he dies, there should be no guilt for his bloodshed. If the sun has risen on him, there should be guilt for his bloodshed. He should make full restitution. If he has nothing, then he should be sold for his theft." The context of this verse is dealing with theft and restitution and gives us a basis for God's law of self-defense. The phrase found breaking up refers to breaking up the roof, window, or door to gain entry during the night hours to someone's home. You know, the owner of the house responds by killing the would-be thief. And in Yahweh's law is that in these circumstances, the owner is innocent of any wrongdoing. He's fully justified in using lethal force to defend himself and his family because it's nighttime, and he can't tell the intent of that person whether they have a gun or not, or whether they're going to harm his family or not. He can't see what they're going to do, and so he uses justifiable defense even to the point of killing that thief. The second part of the passage deals with breaking up under different circumstances. In this case, it's during daylight hours, when presumably the owner of the home can see whether the intruder is armed and if he does or doesn't pose a threat to his personal safety, but is a mere thief. Yet in spite of this, the owner kills the thief. He looks at the thief. He knows the thief isn't armed. It's just it's just somebody breaking into his home to steal things. He's not harmed. He's not threatening his personal safety. But the homeowner kills him anyway. And in this instance, the homeowner is guilty of murder. Because, he was not being threatened. His personal safety wasn't being threatened by the robber. The penalty for theft is restitution, not death. And this is the way it was in God's laws. And in this instance, it was an unauthorized taking of human life because it wasn't a threat to the homeowner, folks. But at the same point, if he had been a threat to the homeowner, you can take his life. And if it was nighttime, the homeowner couldn't see him, shoots him anyway because he perceives a threat, and it's still found later that the man wasn't armed, he's still not held justifiable. You always have the right to protect and defend yourself from perceived threat of harm if you can't tell if the person is going to hurt you or not, or definitely in the case of if this robber had pulled a gun out and threatened this family, threatened this homeowner. Both instances would have been justifiable. In Proverbs 25:26, we read that a righteous man who falters before the wicked is like a murky spring in a polluted well. And certainly, we would be faltering before the wicked if we chose to be unarmed and unable to protect ourselves against an assailant who might be threatening our life. And this also goes with these foreign soldiers that are coming, with this New World Order agenda that are coming, because they fully intend to round up Christians to kill them, and patriots. And the Lord is telling us, don't falter before the wicked. And we are to arm and defend ourselves against it. Don't be taken as sheep to the slaughter. Fight against it. The Christian pacifist may try to argue that God has changed his mind from the time he gave Moses the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20, or for the provisions of justifiable murder in Exodus 22. But in Malachi we read, "For I am the Lord, I do not change," in Malachi 3:6. And even further, it's reaffirmed in the New Testament, where it says in Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Does Jesus advocate violence? No, he doesn't. Does he advocate self-defense? Yes, he does. The Christian pacifists will likely object even still because Christ rebuked Peter, who used a sword to cut off the ear of Malchus, a servant of the high priest, in the company of a detachment of troops. And you read about this in the garden where Jesus was arrested. You can look at this in Matthew 26:52 to 54. But Jesus says to Peter, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How could the Scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen?" It was not the first time that Christ had to explain to the disciples why he had come to earth. To fulfill the Scriptures, the Son of God had to redeem mankind from sin and the penalty of death. And that's why he told Peter to put his sword away, because the Lord had to die. He was voluntarily giving his life up to redeem mankind. While Christ told Peter to put your sword in its place, he clearly didn't tell him to get rid of it forever. That would have contradicted what he told the disciples only hours before. Peter's sword was to protect his own mortal life from danger. His sword was not needed to protect the creator of the universe, the King of Kings, Yahushua himself. Jesus was going to lay down his life for mankind, and the disciples never understood it until he arose from the grave. Peter was going to defend him. The fact that Peter had a sword, and in Luke